Hi everyone, Santiago here, the founder of Artineering, and I'm very excited to be here today because we have a new update to Flair for Maya, Flair 1.2. With it, we bring finally support for macOS. That means that we support all three major operating systems, Windows, Linux, and macOS. And with it, we bring some very nice new features and improvements, which we're gonna break down in this video. Here I have Maya for macOS open, and I'm going to open a scene that has already been stylized. First thing you will see here is that we have a new licensing prompt, and that is because we now offer all different types of licenses, not only subscription-based, but also perpetual and floating licenses. And that's really cool because this has been quite a requested feature, especially floating licenses. So in here I have a license server running, so I'm gonna just enter the IP or the host name, and I'm going to activate the license. This is gonna fetch the available licenses, and if we have a license available, it's gonna automatically activate it here. Now, we have this scene here, and the second thing you will notice is what is this sphere? What's this blue thing here for? And that is because we completely revamped the way proxies work. Now, any Flair shader material can be a proxy. It's not a separate material, it's the same material, just with a different setting. So we can select the material attributes and here define this material as proxy. You will notice it became invisible and now we have some different pigmentation changes. Let's art direct that. So I just open up the noise effects and here I can control the pigment turbulence to be a bit negative or positive, however you want. I want it to be a bit darker. And you will notice, because of the way proxies work, right? It's just a piece of geometry. Without some kind of feathering, you often, or even with feathering, you often got these lines of compenetration because the proxy, which is this piece of geometry, was compenetrating with this piece of geometry. So this was very difficult to get rid of depending on the effect. So what can we do about it now that this is also a normal Flair shader material? We can use wobble. And with it, we can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to wobble this and wobble blur it. Here we have wobble blur. I mean, we have a global value. That's why this is at 0. And now you can get to see that the hard shell proxy now has the embedded diffusion that wobble actually provides, right? If we were to just visualize this without the proxy, you get to see the wobble on the actual material. And this is what it's being applied to in terms of effect. And with it, you can achieve some very nice volumetric gradients within your scene to really art direct it in different ways, however you want. What's really exciting about this as well is that it's not only supports wobble, but it also supports offsets, for example. And with offsets, you can, for example, have different offsets assigned by proxy materials, like, for example, a proxy material that changes the lines that are being generated to only show the outlines at a certain depth or in a specific 3D location. So let's do just that. We're going to increase the flow depth threshold and the color threshold, and we only have the depth threshold here. Let's reduce that, make this to minus 0.02. There we go. Now we got rid of the other two lines, the flow lines and the lines generated by color. And now we only have the depth-based lines. That means that only have the lines from a silhouette. And this kind of control is really nice to have in proxies as well, because if the thresholding, the global thresholding that you have everywhere doesn't work for a specific part of your scene, you can put a proxy and still modify the thresholds with it. So this covers the first part of the updates, meaning we have support for macOS, which you just saw. We completely revamped licensing to include floating licenses or permanent licenses. And now we also completely revamped the proxies and added some nifty features to it so that you can control all sorts of things in a much nicer way. But that's not everything. We have some line updates that I want to share with you as well. The first line updates that I'm going to share with you are related to the outline. And there's always been a difference between an outline, meaning a silhouette line, and the inline lines that are generated inside an object. And we have improved further upon this. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce you the canvas override attribute. This allows you to basically override whatever color you have rendered with the color of the canvas. That means that you can fully see what kind of colors are being generated purely by Flair effects. In this case are the lines and the ground effect here done with wobble and dry brush in this case. And this allows us to better appreciate things like lines, which is what we're going to delve deep now. One of the things that was, especially for me as an artist, I wanted to have control over, okay, how thick is the outline compared to the inline, for example. And this is exactly what the outline width offset allows us to do. In here, we can define an offset so that, for example, outlines become invisible and you just have inlines, or the other way around, make them just bigger outlines and have the inlines still be the same width. So this is quite a nice effect in the case where you wanted to have like thicker outlines, but thinner, more subtle inlines, like a lot of drawings nowadays are made to make it look more graphic. And along the same path, since we're already separating outlines and inlines, what else could we do with it? And this is where things start to get a bit funky. So in here, I have a spotlight and just a white material onto the spotlight onto it, and everything else is black because, you know, it's in the shadow. And because we have now the difference between outline and inline, we can do things like, okay, how does the light respond on the outline compared to the inline? So here we can, for example, have light response on the outline or also on the inline as well. But since we're doing that, what if we did a negative light response so that it doesn't react to light, but it reacts actually to the shadow or the shade? And this is what negative light response will give you. Now you start having lines where it would otherwise have been completely black and dark. And this allows you to do some really cool, like film noir kind of style with lines entirely, right? And if we add some of the geo blur to it, we can really go all out crazy graffiti with it if we wanted to, or just have this very nice noir style. And along the same, while we were updating this, we also realized that it would be really useful to control the amount of sketchiness along the depth of the scene. And this is what the sketchiness depth range and depth factor do. In here, what you can do is, for example, at a certain distance, say I want to have more sketchiness, or I want to have less sketchiness, or at the front you want to have more sketchiness. So you can really decide how you want sketchiness to behave along the depth. You could also achieve this, by the way, with a proxy plane placed at different distances that then control the sketchiness. But having a global control that works for all scenes in production just seemed like a very useful feature for us. And I think some of you might appreciate it quite a bit. So yes, those bring the line changes. The other thing that we have also worked on behind the scenes is in performance. So here we have Flair 1.1.4, what a mouthful. And here we can define here what, for example, we're going to run a benchmark, Flair minus BCH, 100 frames, and let's see how many frames per second we get here. We get around 32 frames per second, and let's open up Flair 1.2 and run the exact same benchmark. And we are running at 80 frames per second. So depending on the scene complexity, you will see some substantial performance improvements, not only while rendering, but also while saving as well. We have also put effort into making saving much more faster than it used to be. So now, in general, working with Flair should feel much smoother. Even rendering, now we're saving images in a separate process as well so that they don't interfere with the rendering itself. So there have been a lot of updates to this release, and you can get to read everything about it here In case you want to know more about it, we have also added documentation for each attribute, meaning you can always rely on the documentation to have the most updated state of things. Now we're going to be working a lot on Flair for Unreal Engine, but we're doing some pretty cool stuff there to make Flair much more modular than it is now. And we're going to be porting that to Flair for Maya as well at some point. So stay tuned. There's some really exciting things to come. Thanks for watching and keep flaring.